You know, when you read Revelation chapter 4, it can be, well, a little much, right? You've got lightning, a sea made of glass, these wild creatures covered in eyes. It's completely overwhelming. But what if I told you that all this crazy imagery didn't just come out of nowhere? That's what we're going to dig into. We're going to trace the history of this vision and see how it's actually the peak of a tradition that goes back centuries, all about one thing. How do you even begin to picture God? So let's start with this idea because it really is the key to everything. The way you picture God, or more importantly, the way you don't picture God, sets the stage for your entire worldview. This isn't just some dusty, abstract theological question. It actually shapes your laws, your worship, your entire relationship with the divine. And for ancient Judaism, this was, to put it mildly, a huge deal. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle the core problem of trying to picture a God you can't see. Then we'll dive into this incredible tradition called temple mysticism. From there, we'll see how all this played into Jesus' relationship with the temple of his day, which is going to lead us right to Revelation 4 and John's mind-blowing vision. And we'll wrap it all up by talking about what this vision is really supposed to make you feel. All right, first things first, we have to get our heads around this huge conflict at the heart of early Jewish thought. On the one hand, you have one of the clearest commandments there is: do not make any image of God, period. It's the ultimate taboo against idolatry. But on the other hand, we're human. We have this deep, deep need to connect, to visualize, to have some concept of the divine. And that clash, it created a massive dilemma. This is the question. This is the challenge that split people into different camps and forced them down two very different paths. How do you give people a sense of God's presence, of his glory, without breaking that fundamental rule? How do you describe the infinite without just shrinking it down into some little finite thing you can put on a shelf? So this question leads to two major answers. On one side, you've got what's called the Pharisaic or Deuteronomist tradition. Their solution was simple: don't even try. God is completely unimaginable, so any image is an idol. End of story. For them, the way you connect with God isn't through a picture, it's through the law. The law itself becomes the expression of God's character. They were so careful about this, they wouldn't even say or fully write God's name, Yahweh. But then you have this other path, temple mysticism, and they took a totally different route. They didn't avoid imagery, they ran right towards it. But they used a very specific kind of imagery, abstract, overwhelming, stuff that would break your brain if you tried to draw it, all to give you an experience of God, a direct, personal encounter. Okay, so let's dig into this temple mysticism idea a bit more, because this is really where things get interesting. This wasn't something the first Christians just invented. No way. It has deep, deep roots in the Old Testament prophets, who were wrestling with this exact same problem hundreds of years before Jesus was even born. And context here is everything. You see, Isaiah has his vision while the first temple is still standing. It's the center of the universe. But then, disaster strikes. The Babylonians invade, and they completely destroy Solomon's temple. It's a national catastrophe. And right in the middle of that trauma, Ezekiel has his vision. The point is, these visions aren't just pretty poems. They are urgent, theological responses to world-shattering events. So to put it simply, temple mysticism is all about a direct, personal encounter with God. And the genius of it is how it gets around the whole no idols rule. The visions are so wild, so symbolic, so intentionally overwhelming that you could never, ever mistake them for a literal photograph of God. It's a way of using imagery to defeat idolatry. Let's jump into Isaiah's head for a minute, back in 700 BC. What does he see? Well, notice what he doesn't see. There's no face, no detailed body. Instead, it's about a feeling, a total sensory overload. A throne that's impossibly high, the hem of a robe that fills the entire temple. Voices so loud they're like thunder shaking the building's foundations, and smoke everywhere. See, it's all about overwhelming sound, light, and these bizarre celestial beings. This becomes the basic vocabulary for this entire tradition. Now we get to Ezekiel. He's writing during the exile when God's house is just a pile of rubble. So what does he see? Not a God trapped in a broken building, but a God who is mobile, a God on the move. And he cranks the imagery up to 11. He describes these wheels within wheels covered in eyes, moving in 4 directions at once. It's spatially impossible. And that's the whole point. Ezekiel is describing something that you literally cannot draw. It's like he's daring you to even try to make an idol out of this.
Okay, fast forward a few centuries, and this all leads us straight to the time of Jesus. And this whole mystical tradition, this focus on a personal relationship with a God who is bigger than any building, well, it's right at the heart of his teachings and his critique of the temple in his day.
Now, here's a detail that is so important, but it's easy to miss. The second temple, the one standing in Jesus' time, was missing something pretty important. The Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, all the sacred stuff, it was gone. It had vanished during the Babylonian exile. So that meant that once a year, when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred spot on earth, he was walking into an empty room. For many people, this made the whole institution feel spiritually hollow. So think about Jesus' message in that context. He's constantly talking about a direct relationship with God. You don't need a priest to go into an empty room for you. It's a personal thing between you and God. This lines up perfectly with that temple mysticism tradition and stands as a direct challenge to the institutional religion that was centered on that empty building. And this all comes to a head with this really powerful story about a fig tree. Jesus sees this tree that has no fruit, and he curses it. Now, this isn't about him being mad at a plant. The tree is the temple. It looks impressive, but it's spiritually fruitless. Then he walks into the actual temple and shuts the whole operation down by flipping over the tables. And when they leave, the fig tree is withered and dead. The message couldn't be clearer. This whole system is over. All right, so after all that buildup, with all that history in our back pocket, we are finally ready for Revelation 4. And what we can see now is that John's vision isn't just some random bizarre dream. No, it's the powerful, intentional climax of this centuries-old mystical tradition we've been following. Just listen to the language John uses. A voice like a trumpet, flashes of lightning, rumblings, and thunder. Do you hear the echoes? This is the same sensory overload we got from Isaiah. And look at the one on the throne. Is there a face? A body? Nope. Just the gleaming of jewels of pure light and color. It's the same exact move. Evoke a feeling of absolute awe without giving you a single thing you could carve into an idol.
And it doesn't stop there. He describes these 4 living creatures, and guess what? They're covered with eyes, front and back. That's straight out of Ezekiel's playbook. And they have 6 wings, just like the seraphim in Isaiah's vision. John is literally grabbing all these classic elements from the prophets. He's showing his homework, signaling to his audience, hey, what I'm seeing, it's the same thing they saw. This is a vision of the same unpicturable God.
Now, of course, for hundreds of years, people have tried to turn this into a code to be cracked. You know, the 24 elders must be the 12 patriarchs plus the 12 apostles. And the 4 living creatures, oh, that's the 4 gospels. And these can be really interesting symbolic connections. But, and this is a really big but, our source material warns that if we get too caught up in this kind of academic puzzle solving, we might completely miss the point. This little phrase right here, it's the key to the whole thing. John says, instantly I was in the Spirit. He doesn't say I flew up to heaven. This isn't a physical trip. He's not an astronaut describing a place he visited. He's telling us this is an internal spiritual experience. It's a shift in consciousness, a revelation that's happening inside his spirit, which is way more profound than just taking a trip to outer space. Okay, now this might be the most mind-bending idea we'll talk about. The source makes the case that all these beings, the elders, the 4 creatures, they're not supposed to be seen as a council of individual advisors sitting around God. Instead, they're literary tools. They're inseparable parts of the glory of God himself. Think of it like this. If you were trying to describe a sunset, you wouldn't just say it was orange. You'd talk about the clouds, the light, the colors, the feeling. All those different things are the sunset. That's what John is doing here. He's throwing every symbol he has at the page to try and describe the multifaceted, overwhelming experience of God's presence. So this brings us to the big takeaway. The so what of all of this? Why did John write down this incredibly complex, dazzling vision? What was he trying to achieve? And here it is. The bottom line. Revelation is meant to be felt, not just figured out. John wasn't writing a theological textbook for scholars to dissect. He was an artist, painting a picture with words, trying to make his audience feel a sense of overwhelming awe and wonder. He was writing for the heart, not just the head. And that means when we get totally hung up on trying to create a perfect chart of what every single symbol means, we're kind of missing the forest for the trees. It's like trying to appreciate a masterpiece painting by analyzing the chemical composition of the paint. You might learn something, sure, but you lose the power of the art. The goal here isn't to get an A+ on a theology quiz. It's to get a tiny glimpse of what it might feel like to stand in the presence of God. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. We're all taught to analyze, to break things down, to solve problems with logic. And that's a good thing. But if a text like this was specifically designed to create an emotional response, a feeling of awe, what essential part of the message do we actually destroy when we come at it with nothing but our intellect?